Hello, I'm Dr. Sheri Duchock, and I am thrilled to be here for this session of EQ How To. I was invited here today to talk about some of the common myths that I have heard through the course of about 10 years training in emotional intelligence. And this training has been across different industries and organizations, as well as various cultures. So I'd like to focus on 3 common myths that I've heard about emotional intelligence, and also talk about strategies that can help us dispel those myths so that we can move forward in our own EQ development. The first myth that I have commonly heard is that certain personalities have a better chance of developing their emotional intelligence, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, or whatever your personality is called by the DISC profile or Myers-Briggs or social styles or any of those various personality inventories that you may have taken through the course of your career. Some people think, well, an extrovert has a better chance of developing EQ because they can start conversations more easily or warm up a room. But think about it. You could have an extrovert who's not a great listener. You may have an introvert who doesn't necessarily contribute a lot verbally in meetings, but they may be highly observant and really listening to everybody in the room. So if you want to get your finger on the pulse of what's going on with your team, your introvert may be invaluable. So what we see is that based on our personality, some of the skills that build into emotional intelligence are easier for some of us and some are more challenging. Think about it. Emotional intelligence is made up of 4 core EQ skills: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. Some of those are easier for us and some of them are more difficult. So the strategy that I want all of us to remember as we work on our emotional intelligence is to stay synchronized. And what that means is make sure that your mind and your body are in sync with the situation or task at hand, rather than falling back on what your personality tendencies dictate or what your emotions are driving you to do in a moment. If you choose to stay synchronized to the task at hand, whatever your personality is, you are going to make more effective choices that move both you and your team forward. The second myth that I commonly hear when I'm conducting emotional intelligence training is people who think that they do not have self-management issues because they don't yell when they're angry or frustrated. And certainly yelling when you're angry and frustrated is an example of a low self-management moment. However, if you're shutting down or tuning out when you're angry, you also are challenged in your self-management. You're just a little quieter about it. And keep in mind that any emotion can create a self-management challenge, even an emotion that you would think of as positive. So for example, let's say it's tax season. Let's say you get a $500 tax refund and you're excited about it. Every reason to be. But if you sit down that night and you spend all $500 and more on things you really don't need online, then you need to look at your self-management. So the recommendation that I make for all of us to evaluate our self-management more clearly and not just limit it to thinking about whether we yell when we're angry is to take control of our self-talk. Because your self-talk drives your behavior. And if your self-talk, when you get a $500 tax refund, is I'm rich, I'm rich, I'm rich, then you may make choices that don't balance emotion and reason. The third myth that I commonly hear is people who are in data-driven professions who don't feel that they really have a need to focus on emotional intelligence or develop it because that's not what's required by their profession. So I'd like to clarify that certainly empathy and communication is part of emotional intelligence, and we all need to improve in those areas. Even if you're in a data-driven business, you need to be able to clearly communicate your ideas. All the brilliance and technical expertise in the world means nothing if we can't share it and communicate it with others. So don't dismiss your need for communication, but I will also point out that emotional intelligence is not just about empathy and communication. If you work on your emotional intelligence, you naturally improve in other areas too, like decision making and time management. For all of us, our emotions create a filter through which we behave, through which we make choices, and through which we decide where to put our efforts and our time. If you can be more self-reflective and recognize how your own emotions may be impacting those decisions, then you can be more effective in the long run. So don't limit your thinking about emotional intelligence to people who are traditionally in roles that we think of as interpersonal careers. Everybody can benefit from developing their emotional intelligence, and we do this using the strategy lean into discomfort. If you are not used to looking at emotions or talking about emotions, lean into your discomfort and realize that if you are willing to explore your moods and your emotions, you can figure out ways to be more effective, even if it's not in your comfort zone. The reality is we're all human, and that means that we've all got a limbic system. So whether you want to admit it or not, you will experience emotions and they will impact you. These myths that we discussed are sometimes misunderstandings, and sometimes they are our attempts to relieve ourselves of the responsibility to grow. So what we have to remember is that EQ is a skill and a choice. It is something that all of us can develop, and we're all in this together. I really appreciate your time today, and we look forward to seeing you at the next EQ How To.